Hi everybody, so this is Mel here. I hope if you've gone back to work today, you've had a pretty reasonable start to the week again. And thank goodness it's going to be a short week for us all. So wanted to say welcome, a big open welcome to everybody that has joined the Great Sugar Shed. So basically next Monday we're going to be beginning our 7-day journey to start cutting out the excess or the added sugar in our diet. And I think post Easter, after all those chocolate treats, and I'm a little bit sick of the sight of it myself, this is a great time to begin that journey when we're probably a little bit sick of the sight of chocolate and we're a bit more motivated about making some changes. So I've promised in the group to do you a little explanatory video to help you understand food labels, and this is going to really help you make a more informed choice when you're looking at foods than when you're buying packaged foods, so that you can identify the high sugar foods, look at limiting those, and then go for the lower sugar options. So with the power of technology, I am sharing my screen with you. So I'm going to try this, so fingers crossed that it works. I've done a little presentation, can't get the teacher out of me, to hopefully explain more clearly what it is that we need to be looking for in food labels. Okay, so let's go. Lots of you have completed and answered the poll that I put on to the Great Sugar Shed yesterday, so thank you very much for that. And it's clearly showing that chocolate, funnily enough, is the biggest contender when it comes to our sugary vices and foods that we really battle with or might have cravings for. And basically chocolate is the #1 food that we get most of our added sugar from. Also coming under that umbrella is sort of jams and sweets as well. So I'm in that bag. I struggle with, well, chocolate, sweets, cakes and biscuits actually. So I can't wait until next week to sort of make a concerted effort to start making some healthier choices, to be honest. So when we look at sort of across the UK, the top 6 sweet offenders, say #1 is chocolate, and then we probably get around 25% of our added sugar from soft drinks. So whether that's fizzy, the sort of non-diet versions, it could be fruit juices or smoothies, it could be any other sort of non-alcoholic drink. So soft drinks is a bit of a worry sort of nationally in terms of our sugar intake. We probably get 1/5 of our sugar intake from biscuits, buns and cakes, certain amount from alcohol. So if you've been on holiday recently or certainly having some time off over the bank holiday weekend and we've all perhaps overindulged, we need to be sort of mindful of the amount of sugar and calories in alcohol. And then we get a smaller amount from dairy. So here I'm thinking of some of the fruit yogurts or ice creams, that sort of thing, milkshakes where there's added sugar in there, and then 5% from savoury foods. And that's something that people often forget, but particularly with condiments and sauces like ketchup, for example, or pasta sauces, there's quite a large amount of hidden sugar in there. So over this week I'm going to be explaining more about what you can look out for. Okay, so when you go shopping, there are food labels that we can check, and there's 2 types of labels. So we can have on the left side here your typical nutrition label, which will be found either on the side or the back of your food packet. And here essentially this is giving you the total sort of the key macronutrients, nutritional information. So in terms of your total calories, carbohydrates, fats and protein, and as you see on this one, you've got fibre and salt in there. So you tend not to get the whole sort of kit and caboodle of vitamins and minerals unless there's something important that the sort of food item needs to highlight or show. So that will usually tell you sort of the calories and the grams of, let's say, sugars in this case per 100 grams. So that means that you can compare different foods, and we'll talk about what's a high and low sugar content in a minute, and also per serving. So on the left here, we've got basically a food label from a bread packet. So it's looking at each slice of bread, which is typically 44 grams. In this case, will give you 1.7 grams of sugar, which is 2% of your total recommended amount. So, in terms of this sugar challenge, we don't need to be avoiding all sugar. It's basically impossible to eliminate all sugar from our diet, and to be honest, we don't need to be doing that. What we need to be trying to tackle is this added sugar that we get a lot of confectionery and processed foods that is contributing to tooth decay and our expanding waistlines. And then what was introduced back in 2013 was front of pack labelling. So as you see on the right hand side here, you might sort of be familiar with these, what we call these traffic light labels. So these are highlighting certain ingredients or nutrients in the food that will suggest that they are present in high amounts, medium amounts, or low amounts. And this traffic light labelling is really useful for us to sort of at a glance quickly identify foods that are perhaps high in certain components, like sugars, for example. So this one's showing it's red, or if we're going for green, where it's easy to see foods that we can sort of pop into our trolley when we're dashing around the supermarket trying to get the shopping. The thing to say about this front of pack labelling is that it's voluntary. So not all food manufacturers will use the front of pack labelling, and not all of them will use the colouring system. And I think they're a bit canny with this, because if that traffic light labelling system is going to highlight that their food, let's say, for example, is high in sugar, and that means we're not going to buy it, they're not going to promote that element of it. So they may have that front of pack labelling, but it doesn't have the traffic light labels in it. Okay, so then we go on these front of pack labels. So as we say, it's at a glance telling you if it's high, medium or low in either fat, that's total fat, saturated fat, salt or sugars. So what we're looking for on front of pack labels, particularly when it's concerning sugar, is to go for green. These are foods that generally we can eat freely, that we do not need to be worried because they have a low sugar content. The amber foods, we can consume those in moderation, okay, so perhaps 1 to 3 times a week. And then the foods that are highlighted in red, so those labels that might have a red sugar label, those are your treats, those are your occasional foods. So what we have to bear in mind is when you do your shopping, how many greens, how many ambers and how many orange reds you've got. Okay, so coming on to this colour coding, I've got some examples of different foods. I'm going to try an annotation here. Highlighter, spotlight, does this work? Let's have a look. So on this one, oh, it goes round and round. Let's try the highlighter. Does that work? Okay, so on this one, that's pretty nifty. We've got tin of tomatoes, as you might expect, in terms of it's just pure tomatoes essentially that are canned. There are no real many added ingredients in there, and you can see that they are all green. So you've got 8 grams of sugar in half a can of tomatoes, so that's within the threshold to keep it as a low sugar food. And so those sort of tin tomatoes would be an absolutely fine product to have. There are going to be natural sugars in tomatoes, and we're not worried about those naturally existing sugars in fruit and vegetables. It's the sugars that we find added to certain food products. So up here we've got Oats So Simple. Okay, so in the corner you've got your traffic light labelling, but as you can see on there, that's the example where it's not coloured. So you've got your golden syrup oat cereal breakfast bars. They're not going to be highlighting the fact that even that it's going to be a high sugar food, and actually that's something that we might not want to be consuming too often. Over here on the left, I think we've got some potato products over here. We've got here in terms of sugar, again, you've got a low sugar product, so 0.8 grams per serving, which is 135 grams. So again, that's really easy to see. You haven't got any red labels on there, so that could be something you could put into your shopping trolley. Right, let's go up here. Okay, so in terms of our sugar limits, recommendations now say that we should have no more than 5% of our total energy, or otherwise known as calorie intake, in the form of free sugars. So for an adult, that equates to around 30 grams a day. And we're also recommended to not only cut down the amount of added or free sugars in our diet, but also up the amount of fibre. So we're going to be going for less sugar and more fibre next week, which is actually going to sort of help us achieve both of those elements. So for children, it's going to be less than that. The difficulty is when it says free sugars. So if you've had a look at my sugar, the Bitter Truth document that I uploaded onto the Great Sugar Shed yesterday or the day before, I've lost track with a holiday, it explains a little bit more about what a free or added sugar is. But just going back to sort of what we're talking about with fruit and vegetables, it's not naturally present in the food. Now, when you're looking at food labels, if I run back to the beginning here, okay, on the left hand side here, you've got on the food label, let's put our little annotation back on. Let's get rid of those. This is rather clever, isn't it? So here in the middle, you have got carbohydrates, 45.5 grams, of which sugars are 3.8. Now, I mean, that's not a high sugar food, but it doesn't tell us on that food label if those sugars are in fact naturally present or if they are added sugars. So that is the difficulty. So hopefully over this next week and the following week, I'm going to share with you a little bit more around explaining and understanding what to be looking for in terms of these free and added sugars. Okay, so when we're looking at a food label, an easy way to try and remember it, if what makes a food green in terms of its traffic light label color code, is that if there is less than 5 grams of sugar per 100 grams of product, it will be given a green traffic light label. So it means it's a low sugar food. We don't need to be overtly worried about including that food, you know, in abundance in our diets. A high sugar food contains more than 22.5 grams of sugars per 100. So it doesn't necessarily matter if that's free or naturally existing sugar. It's a high sugar food, and so that's what's going to contribute to tooth decay and also to our expanding waistlines and type 2 diabetes and so on. So on your front of pack labels, go for green because it'll have less than 5 grams per 100, and that way you're going to sort of have a better option in your shopping basket. So pitfalls that we need to be looking out for are remembering that there are no such things as a healthy sugar. So when we hear about healthy sugar alternatives like honey, for example, or using sort of fruit juices and fruit purees to sweeten foods, at the end of the day, our body doesn't really care what form the sugar is in. Sugar is sugar when we look at the effect that it has on our teeth, the effect that it has on our blood sugar levels, and the calories that it carries. So fruit juice and honey also count as added sugars. So we need to be mindful about adding extra sugars to our diet. And I'll talk to you a little bit more as the week goes on about what you can use as alternatives. Next one, a no added sugar product does not mean that it's low in sugar or sugar free. So there may be a high concentration of sugar in a product. It could be concentrated sugars in dry fruit, or it could be a fruit drink. And just because they haven't added any extra sugar doesn't mean to say that it isn't a high sugar food to start with. So again, go back and look at the food nutrition label. If it's got less than 5 grams per 100, it's a goer. Sugars hide where you don't expect to see them. So there may well be cereal bars, there may well be cereal products, lots of savoury products, including crisps even, that contain sugars. And so even though it's savoury, it's still worth checking the nutritional labels and ingredients on that product, and you'll become more familiar with what foods that you need to be mindful of and looking at how often you put them in your shopping basket. Cereals, cereal fruit bars, fruit juices and yogurts, particularly of the sort of low fat variety dairy products, are often higher in sugar. So again, check those labels. And generally a low fat product does not necessarily mean it's low in sugar, and it also does not mean it's healthy or going to be good for your waistline. So again, we'll get a little bit more clarification of that over the next week or two. And then really, you know, don't be frightened of fruit. We're hearing now we need to be eating up around 10 portions of fruit and veg a day. My advice on this is, if you're not even hitting the 5, just go for more. The more the merrier, but try to have a roughly equal balance, if not a heavier balance, in favour of vegetables, just because they have a lower sugar content. And if you're trying to change your palate, it needs to be constantly re-educated to perhaps go for more sort of savoury foods rather than reinforcing that sweet pleasure that we get with foods. So it's about trying to change our palate over that 7-day challenge as well. Okay, so that is me. I hope that's worked all right. I'm going to stop the share and bring me back in picture. There we go. So hopefully that's been useful. I'm going to post this onto the page now. If you've got any comments or questions below, please do add them on. I'll come back to you, and I'll be in touch again tomorrow. That's Wednesday. Have a great day. Bye.